Hi, everybody, and welcome to TNM Coaching Unplugged and Zoran Interconnected podcast. I'm so grateful and happy that you're with us again. I'm grateful and happy that our community is growing, that you're sharing our podcasts, and that you are growing, evolving, and expanding with us. This is the space for you to elevate your heart, to elevate your soul, to expand your mind, and to learn something new, something that will really benefit your work, your business, your family, and more. Today's guest is not just a coach. She is a force of nature. Dr. Carol Talbot is pioneering consciousness with a PhD in quantum morphogenetic science. I did it right. The master firewalker, trainer, breatharian, creator of possibility path. She has decades of experience in working with people, breaking through the illusions and awakening the new dimensions of intelligence. Carol leads the evolution, which is what humanity is meant to do at this moment in time. This conversation is something that I would really love to invite you to go beyond the mindset, beyond the current framework of the references, into the frequency, into the energy, into the untapped realms of who we truly are. Carol, welcome to the podcast. I was really looking forward to these conversations because you and I have a lot in common, a lot of topics that we're playing in right now. So for me, it's always wonderful to invite somebody like you, a common playmate on the journey of evolution.
Absolutely. And there was that instant synergy as soon as I heard that you were talking in sort of my neck of the woods in Dubai and organic intelligence. It was like, I think I have to be there.
Exactly. So we recognize each other and so happy and grateful that you're here. And our audience, that don't know you, we always love to start with a little bit of introduction about yourself, about your journey, because your CV, what you've done in your life, how you work with the people, who are you at this moment in time? It's quite impressive. And I always like to ask this question. So how did you get there? What called you onto this path of discovery, transformation, evolution? What was your first connection and how did you end up being in this space?
I believe that I'm very blessed, Zoran, with a love of learning. It really is a passion for me, and in particular, coming across information that's a little bit left of center. And that probably was instilled in me through my parents, particularly my mother, who used to sort of sneak off to London and attend lectures on Uspensky and Gurdjieff and other philosophers. And then if I even go further back to my grandparents, I later found out that my grandfather had such an interest in Madame Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, and all things beyond this world as well. So that's where I started, always this love of reading, learning, coming across information. In fact, with a lot of my friends, I'm a little bit of a joke because instead of sort of going on a holiday or going away, I'd always be going off on another course. So that a bit of a course junkie, off for another thing. And, that was my model. I always invested in myself. Every year I decided what courses, what programs I was going to attend. And then I remember a time in 2011, and I come back after going back and forth to the west coast of the US about 5 times for a particular program with quite a well known figure. And I looked at my notebook, and there really wasn't much there. And I thought there was nothing that I'd heard that I wasn't already aware of, particularly from the field of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which I like to describe as the user manual for your mind. And I really do believe everybody can benefit from understanding how we work, how we do what we do. It's an epistemology, and it also gives you a number of tools for very rapid shifts and changes. So, of course, I was in that sphere and a master trainer of NLP for about running certification programs for about 18, 20 years. And it still forms a good foundation of what I do. But above and beyond that, there was always more. So from that program where I looked at my notes and didn't find any, I decided that my mind was full. It was time to go on experiences and empty out a bit. So I found myself in unusual parts of the world. I love traveling. And one particular experience was with the Pachamama Alliance, who are an NGO, and they work with the Achua tribe in Ecuador. And they always say, if you meet with the Achua tribe, it's no coincidence. They're a dream culture. You've been dreamed there. And I would say for me, that was a pivotal step because that's changed the trajectory. And again, what I experienced left me with, what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? And so again, carried on seeking and searching and learning. And I've also, Zoran, been blessed with coming across and having the pleasure and blessing of working with many mentors, masters, the kind of teachers that you don't usually come across, that they're not out there in terms of social media. You find them by a chance meeting or a chance introduction. And quite frankly, they've been extraordinary. And so I guess that meeting with the extraordinary, that love of seeking, searching, and learning brought me to quantum morphogenetic science. And there's a story behind that that links back to my mother planted the seed for that, having attended something similar about 30 years previously. So that's sort of where I find myself at, always a seeker searcher, except the seeking and searching has calmed down a lot now in terms of being in resonance, being in alignment, and remembering our multidimensional nature, that we truly are brilliance. We're all that and more.
Yeah, and I'm going to open that field of multidimensional resonance and frequencies because I think this is really important for everybody to understand and people who are not aware of it to gain that awareness. And before we jump into that, so what happened when you met that tribe that dreamed you and you said that they really kind of changed the trajectory of your life? Is it something that you can share? What was the impact of that?
Well, I went with, I'd heard of this gathering and these groups actually from the program that I went on that sort of said my mind's full, and I thought, I'm going to go on that, but I can't go this year, it'll be next year. So again, I'd already planted the seed that I would go, and I went with Lynn and Bill Twist. Lynn is, I don't know whether you've come across Lynn Twist. She was a born fundraiser, and she is magnificent, as is her husband. So it was an extraordinary trip, and quite a lot of us. However, I was put in a very, very small group on when we were going off to do some extraordinary experiences where, they leave you alone in the rainforest by yourself for a while. And most people go, oh, what about bugs? What about snakes? What about creepy crawlies? And it was surprising, Zoran, because I didn't feel scared at all. Not even though I was completely alone. Because you don't want to see the bugs, the snakes, or any of those kind of animals. And quite frankly, they don't want to see you. And then when we were sort of collected again, my little group of about 6 people were taken to a very small village, it's so pristine there. Everything grows above the ground, and what rubbish you take in, you have to take out. But on that night, I saw some extraordinary things, that, again, sent me on a path of there's something more. And it was a life-changing experience that led me down some dead ends as well, to meet with other people and different courses which I no longer resonate with. And isn't that the beauty of growth and learning? That remembering where you are now, rather than looking back and saying, oh, wasn't I stupid? It's, no, that's who I was then. And it was good for who I was then. And this is great for who I am now. And I love the, sort of when people say, oh, I've arrived. Now you get to that age where you've never arrived. There's always more. There's always going to be more. So
Yeah.
this is just the evolution of where you've landed right now, and the mystery and the delight of where you will land in the future. So I've been, again, very lucky with having experiences that have really changed my model of the world, how I see things. And, more recently, I would say, seeing a different side of things. And we go back to what resonates, what and who resonates and who doesn't, and being okay with that, because you sometimes go against the grain, particularly when people want to be followers or find a master and a guru, and it's being your own master, your own leader, your guru, and sometimes that doesn't resonate very well with other people.
Absolutely. So Going back to your mom and the morphogenetic field, you said that she planted the seed and you picked it up. So for the people who are not familiar with that term, people who don't even understand what that means, can you connect us with the story of your mom? And then, what is it? And how did you get in this studying, and really understanding the field?
Well, I feel it's important just to say everything comes at the right time. Even though we'd like it sooner rather than later, it does really come at the right time. I've been in the US, so this was nearly 10 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. I've been in the US with one of my mentors and also on a sound healing program as well, where you're toning, using your voice. And then with my mentor for a time as well in Arkansas in the US. And I stopped in the UK to see my mum, and she showed me a manual that she'd held on to for about, I don't know, 20 plus years, 25 years. And it was very interesting in that it had lots of diagrams. It looked like it was important, and it was strange that she held on to it for such a long time. But quite frankly, a lot of it went right over my head. I didn't understand it. And I remember my mother saying that a lot of it at the time that she attended the program had also gone over her head. Anyway, coming back from another trip, probably a year later, when I got back to Dubai, at one of the alternative centers here, there was a talk going on, and I thought that looks interesting. So I went. And when you walk into something and you get that kind of like bing, 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 there's something more for me to learn here. I got that. And I knew that I needed to mentor with this gentleman. So I went back the next day to have a chat with him. And funnily enough, he had been the promoter and knew the mentor that I'd been working with in Arkansas very, very well. Very well. So first coincidence. He took a phone call, and while he took a phone call, he said, "Carol, just have a look at that manual. You might find it interesting." And I thought, I've seen this before. So I immediately called my mother and said, "Show me the manual again." And she did. His name was on it. She had attended the course 20, 25 years earlier with him and his then wife. Can you believe it? Now that's just too much. So again, that started my trajectory into an alternative field of study, which is I call quantum morphogenetic science, but now I also like to term it as multidimensional intelligence, because it helps you understand our true cosmic history, much of which has been forgotten, because 90% of the stream of consciousness that should be available to us is turned off. It's like a down to a sort of low dimmer switch, and also because of distortions in our DNA. So this is why we don't remember who we truly are, our brilliance, and we don't remember our multidimensional anatomy and our true multidimensional nature of our DNA. So this is where quantum morphogenetic physics and science helps us remember our true cosmic history, who we are from a multidimensional aspect and our multidimensional anatomy, the stairway to heaven, so to speak, almost the stairway back to source, from understanding you now in physical form, probable cells, alternative timelines, the soul, the oversoul, the avatar rishi, the Buddha, all the way up to source. And of course, our step down from source, which going back to energy, going back to frequency, from the sound and light fields to who we truly are. So, you come across information when it's right. And I believe when you come across information, it's an echo back of that which you already know that is awakening. It's a bit like reading a book and you say, this author's brilliant. Well, actually, that author is only echoing back that which you already know, which is why it resonates with you, why it sits with you. Because if we look at the world from a holographic perspective, it's all us. And it's all being unraveled and revealed at just the right time.
And for the people, I can hear my listeners, they're my listeners are different from different dimensions, some of them really understand this and some of them are like, wow, this is so interesting. And they're like, Zoran, ask this question. So I'm just going to channel some of my listeners and ask a few questions about that. And they're not easy questions. So in the understanding of multidimensional anatomy of human nature, you mentioned that when we understand this, we understand who we are, and we also understand where we come from. So from your point of view, through your research and studying and coaching and teaching and guiding people, what would you say? Who are we, and where did we come from? I know it's a difficult question. I know that, let's do our best. I'll chip in, I promise.
Okay, it's a provocative question in terms of it will challenge many people's beliefs. And I believe that we're not all cast from the same die,
Okay.
that we have chosen different experiences. I believe we play in multidimensional realities, that, just a small portion of our consciousness is stationed in this identity. Yet, as we repair our DNA, because our DNA is, maybe this helps a little, understanding that our DNA has been distorted by digressed races and as being further distorted by the food that we eat, by the liquid that we take in, by the air that we breathe. And so think of your DNA like a film strip. And when a film strip is in a projector, when light hits it, it projects what's on the film strip onto an outside screen. Well, if you think of your DNA like that film strip, if there's distortions in the film strip, then the movie that you're going to see has glitches. If there's glitches in your DNA, when consciousness comes in, what's projected on your outside world creates physical distortions, emotional distortions, mental distortions, and spiritual distortions. And this is the reason that some of us prefer to follow certain paths, like legions, that some people will call religion. But legions, there's so many clues in our language as well into who we truly are. So if I say, from my model of the world, where we come from, it may land with some people and it may not resonate with others. It's about finding your truth. So some people still believe in, Charles Darwin's evolution of the human species. And others, to me, that's a kind of like no. So I remember reading a number of books, and I'm sure, Zoran, you've had this experience where you've read a book and you read the page and you read the page again and you read the page again, and it just doesn't land. And then later you pick up the book and you cannot put it down. It answers all your questions. And so it is that through my studies and a lot of what I write about in my last book, and also in terms of what I'm writing about now, more in multidimensional intelligence, is helping people remember. Again, come together again to remember who they are. But that is also dependent on the state of your DNA. Because when your DNA is distorted, you can only expand your consciousness to a certain level. As you repair your DNA, which is part of the process that I've been going through with source feeding and the breatharian path, it is not the only path to repair your DNA. It's a path, a spiritual initiation that I have chosen and may not be for everyone. And I do like to push boundaries and push possibilities. So that's when I became aware of all of my brilliance, that having spent probably many years of my life going to tarot readers, clairvoyance, clairaudience, all this, what should I do? What should I do? Knowing that you really do have the answers within. And now we're in an age where we've got IQ, intellectual intelligence, EQ, emotional intelligence, SQ, spiritual intelligence, organic intelligence, Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. And then we have artificial intelligence, which again pulls us out and further away from our true brilliance. I believe it's time to reclaim our sovereignty and realize that we are all that is and more. So when you ask who we are and where we came from a multitude of species, we are an experiment. From the true cosmic history perspective, we're the Tyrannusium 2 experiment. The first one didn't work. So we are here to explore and to discover more of who we are. And that is, to me, multidimensional intelligence, organic intelligence, the evolution of becoming more than you thought you could be?
I have to tell you, this is the best answer to this question I've ever heard. I've been to many sessions and many conversations, and also to many teachers. And when people ask them these questions, people have a different take on it. And always, this is one of these challenging questions. And I love what you said. I really, truly love that you're giving the ownership to everybody who is listening, because your filter of the world and your upbringing will create certain context. And based on what you know and you don't know right now, you create your understanding. This is just to inspire you to think beyond limitations. So I love that you really invited participants to really, really, go backwards and really understand where they are, what is their current level of consciousness, and how they can make sense out of it. Because this is the quest. Everybody's looking for this. Everybody's asking this question, and you chose to repair your DNA through a specific path, and you believe it's really important for all of us right now. I believe that too. I just to add to what you said, I believe the DNA reparation and us really working heavily on DNA, it's our way towards full activation of human possibility, of what we came here to experience. Who can we really become? It's really locked within the DNA code. And unfortunately, that code is not living, it's not activated, it's a little bit dormant, a little bit sleepy, a little bit dimmed, as you said, like a dim light. So we really need to step the game in a way. And you have a specific path, and you said that there are other paths. So do you believe, as I do, I mean, this is another interesting question, that this is where the game is right now, that the activation of DNA that leads to activation or multidimensional consciousness is something that we all need to pay attention to, and why?
Yes, and there is a lot of misinformation out there. And this is also where, as you repair your DNA, excuse my language here, but your bullshitometer goes up. if that's a term I can use, in that
Of course you can. Absolutely. Yeah, real.
when I think of, what I used to listen to, what I used to read, and it's like, no, no, no. So as you know, truth doesn't lie. Sound doesn't lie. Light can be deceptive, but truth doesn't lie. And so, are there people saying, do a meditation, DNA activation, 12-strand DNA? Well, if you had 12 strands activated, you wouldn't actually be here in physical form, because that's just not possible. So I find there's a lot of misinformation. And also, of course, mainstream science doesn't acknowledge the multidimensional nature of our DNA. So if you think of DNA like a treasure chest and you're given the key, and then when you take that key, you find out it only opens a very small portion of that treasure chest. The rest is what mainstream science calls junk DNA. I prefer to use the word intron meaning potential and possibility. So it's about bringing more of that on stream. Then as you do, it's like instead of playing one instrument, you start to bring in the whole orchestra, and a symphony starts opening up the gateway to other possibilities and other realms. So from a simplistic point of view, though, are there simple ways to start cleaning up your DNA? Absolutely. Diet, parasite cleansing. So a lot of people detox, but again, a missing ingredient there is parasites, because parasites, by the way, can be physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual as well. And I think you've probably seen enough people go on so-called spiritual retreats and end up in a worse state rather than a better state. So parasites is a big thing to detox from. Again, starting maybe from a physical point of view. There's breath work, sound work, toning. Our voice is a beautiful musical instrument. And also meditation, because again, from my point of view, when you meditate, it's like a bit like being in the dark. I spent 10 days, 10 nights in a dark room retreat in complete darkness where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And what happens in the dark and when you meditate, you release huge amounts of melatonin. Well, most people think of melatonin as, the thing that helps us sleep, and then it's serotonin that allows us to wake up or come out of meditation. But melatonin also has been shown to assist in DNA repair. And the great news is, if you meditate on a regular basis, they did a study that showed that the regular meditators, they produce 500% more melatonin than non-meditators, which means even if you have a regular meditation practice, and by the way, meditation doesn't have to be sitting cross-legged and going, it can be out walking, it can be in periods of silence, it can be listening to sacred music. There's many different ways. But again, if you're already meditating, you're repairing your DNA because huge amounts of melatonin are being released. So are there different paths? Absolutely. And I go back to one size doesn't fit all. Hence, one form of meditation may not work for others.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that because, that's the nature of human diversity and the beauty of who we are, the experiment that we call human nature, that we all are part of a different perspective and that we have unique experiences. And part of our quest into learning about ourselves is actually being able to find what really inspires you, what ignites you, what do you need to learn, how do you need to learn to get to know oneself on a deeper level. What really inspired me about you is that you're stretching the boundaries and we have sense of you throughout this conversation that you're a lifelong learner, that you put yourself into different situations, that you're traveling, that you're experimenting, that you are outdoorsy, that you are stretching the limitations. And those limitations when it comes to being breatharian, it's something when I met you that was really fascinating to me because I met few people. And I think this is something that not so many people can do, right? And I know that I'm not ready for this. I know, for example, this could not be my path. Even if I was to try, my body's like, ah. So tell me just a little bit about that because that was something that I found that very interesting. I think audience will find it too. How did you decide to choose that, and what is the outcome and benefit for that practice for you in your life right now?
Well, you're quite right. I do like to push boundaries, and I've always been fascinated by the masters, the gurus, the so-called superhumans that are said to walk on water, teleportation, live off prana for many, many years, live off universal life energy. And my view is if they can do it, then why have I not been taught this? And of course, we go back to childhood conditioning that from the moment we're born, we're given a name, given a script, a set of beliefs placed into a religion, sent to school, taught a history that may or may not be true. And that automatically puts us in a very limiting paradigm. And one of the huge programs and conditions is food, and that it's impossible to sustain yourself on prana alone. And it's indoctrinated into us, and even more so in this day and age. So the question I often like to ask is, what are you really hungry for? Because do you eat because it's breakfast time, lunchtime, dinner time, and we've been taught, and snack in between? Or are you eating because you're bored, because it's social, because, we've been taught and told to? Yet if you think about, if you're sick, it's other people that say you have to eat. Your body knows what to do, and it knows to go into dry fasting mode, nothing, so that autophagy can kick in, the stem cell crew can be released, and it can get on and do what it was originally designed to do, to be back in balance. But because of all the food, the supplements, mainstream allopathic medicine, we're taught to trust doctors rather than ourselves. And we're taught that we have to eat. But then you look at the state of the food that we're eating right now, and going back to energy and frequency, our food holds an energy signature from where it was grown, how it was harvested, how it was prepared. So if you go back to ancient times when they always used to bless the food, blessing of the food was a way for it to resonate more, in more alignment with your own energy signature. So that's sort of one path. For me, as I said, I'm about pushing the boundaries. And I have been vegetarian for a long, long, long time, since my teenage years. And then gradually over the years, I've eaten lighter and lighter and lighter, and naturally found things just left my diet naturally. Like, even eggs. One day I just thought, I don't think I can eat those anymore. And I never have since. So my diet became lighter and lighter. And I decided that this is a path that I wanted to pursue, to see if it was possible. And for my own desire to push the boundaries and see what's possible. If the superhumans and gurus and masters can do it, then why can't I? So I was originally designed to go on a dark room breatharian program with Jasmine, who's probably one of the most famous breatharians in the world, having gone over 30 years without the need for food. And I say need for food because she can eat, as can I. And that was postponed because of the situation in the world. So it was actually in 2023 that I went into the dark room where we spent 9 days or 10 days, 10 nights without food. We could have liquid if we chose, water or diluted juices if we chose. As a result of that, I did start eating again, and very, very lightly. So I wanted to push the boundaries further. So last year, I'm about a year and 3, 4 months into this journey, I went on another program. Sometimes you need to be on a program that gives you a little bit of discipline. What I would say, though, is there's no 9-day, 21-day, 10-day program that's going to magically transfer you into this path. You need to be a frequency match. If you're not a frequency match, you cannot hold it. And testament to that is most of the people I went on these programs with chose not to continue this path. And for many different reasons, Zoran, social, if you've got a family, many of our best experiences, like, Christmas and birthday celebrations, they have an element of food, and it's the culture in many countries as well. So it's a tough program to break away from. Now, there are different levels of this path. So when people say, do I not miss food? No, I don't. I'm never really hungry. Do I eat? Yes, because there are different levels. The level 4 breatharian is people like Prahlad, who will live in a cave for 60, 70 years and take no food, no water. Now, of course, I knew I wasn't going that path, and that's very rare because most people want to also be in the world at this time. So I'm what's called a level 3 breatharian. There's over 200,000 of us in the world, which means that we usually have diluted juices, do like a cup of tea, diluted smoothie, diluted soup. It's mainly a liquid diet, I would say, and a lot of water. And I will eat occasionally. So if friends invite me, and I told my friends, hey, do continue inviting me. I may choose to eat and I may not. And I'm very blessed. My friends respected me. But often I will eat with them and I enjoy it thoroughly. I enjoy it thoroughly. So I will eat maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks. And maybe I still have a sweet tooth, so maybe I'll have a piece of chocolate or a spoonful of hummus. So I just know that I do not need it. I'm always full. It's just sometimes we miss the pleasure of taste.
Yeah.
Now, this also comes down to the fact that when I do eat, Zoran, I'm out like a light. I can barely stay awake. So one of the questions I ask people is, why do you eat? And most people would say, for energy. Well, it's not actually true. Our cells need energy to repair your DNA and repair your body, but your cells do not directly get energy from the food that you eat. When you eat food, it goes through a very complicated process to make something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the fuel of the cells. But again, with the toxins in our food, that process is squeezing a tiny drop of energy, and then that energy is used to deal with the toxins that were in the food that you just ate to give you energy. So, and think about other ways of nourishing yourself. A nourishing conversation. Spending time. I saw some pictures on social media over the Easter holidays, and you were saying how much you loved Easter and being with family, being with friends. Isn't that nourishing? Having those experiences, listening to good music, that's nourishing. So there are so many different ways to nourish yourself, as well as the more obvious like sun gazing, breath work, being by the sea, being in nature. So many different ways to nourish yourself. So it's a path that I've chosen to experiment with. Will I continue it? I don't know. It was also for my thesis for my PhD, which was bioregenesis of the human DNA blueprint through source feeding. So I couldn't be writing a thesis without experiencing it myself.
Wow.
So was it a challenging transition? Yep, it was, because for the first 2 months we were allowed nothing solid, so that you actually give this muscle, the chewing muscle, a rest. And when I first came off the last program, I'll tell you, Zoran, I was all over the shop. And I wondered whether it was because of I'd lost a lot of weight, and my weight is stable now, or whether it was frequencies, and it was definitely new frequencies coming in. So did it open me up in a new way? Absolutely.
But yeah, I can see that. I can see that and feel the light. Absolutely. When you do something like that, you open up to the completely different experiences and courageousness to stretch the boundaries, courageousness to go beyond what we believe it's possible, courageousness to put yourself in the situation and to experience it, especially when you're writing your thesis. Yeah, that's so beautiful that you shared this with us. Thank you so much. So
And
becoming
so, when you're working with leaders and with
Mm,
people in mentoring and coaching, and particularly mentoring, or if you're in a room full of people, you want to be that inspiration, because, as you know, being called a teacher, trainer, facilitator is a misnomer. We can inspire people to step forward. And I do like to break boundaries, whether it's, taking people through a firewalking experience from impossible to possible. And so, showing them that this is possible. And as I mentioned again, and I want to reiterate, it's not a path for everyone. This is not about starvation. People fast. People also do intermittent fasting. That is completely different because ultimately you're dependent on food. You need to go back to eating. So this is a very, very different experience. And I did want to mention that because it can be dangerous.
Exactly. And also do it with the right people who can guide and supervise and mentor and show you the way and hold this responsible container of the transition and so on and so forth. I think this is something that you really communicated well to everybody to hear. And I love that as coach, trainer, leadership development specialist, you are willing to stretch the boundaries because a lot of our work is exactly that. When I'm sitting in the boardroom with the executives or I am in a workshop with the leaders or managers or even the small business owners, people want to be inspired to stretch themselves to the next level and beyond. And what you're saying to us, which I really value about you, Carol, and this is the reason why I would love to have you on our podcast, is that you're authentic. You're walking your talk. Sometimes in this world, we have a lot of teachers, a lot of people who are teaching, but are not embodying the teaching in itself. And that can get confusing for some people because they would see and say, well, this is a great teacher, but they're not embodying the teaching. How can they teach us? They're not real. And I think that part, when you choose how to be a teacher, the way shower, somebody who guides consciousness, part of that journey is embodying as much as you can to show the way through your own experiences. And then you can inspire others as well. So I'm so grateful and thankful that you're doing this. Now, we're coming towards the end of the podcast, and I really would love to end up with your perspective on humanity and what's coming up. What I feel is that we're in the pivotal stages of transformation. I think that right now it feels like, to me, maybe that's not true, but to me it feels like that technology is emerging, the AI is taking over, the Borg is really being present. People are distancing themselves from themselves. I see a lot of people in my community losing themselves within the AI, justifying this daily conversation with AI in the most beautiful way. And I value AI. Let me just say, I had podcasts before that I said, this is a great enhancer of human consciousness. But we see the technology is really pushing into it. We see this organic multidimensional intelligence is really activating as well. I can see that a lot of people are becoming awakened. They're becoming aware that they need to do something to restore, to repair. Maybe they don't have a language. I need to sit down and restore and repair my DNA. And this is the reason why I'm so grateful that you're bringing this new language forward to frame it so people can understand what they're doing instead of just, I need to feel better or I need to feel more inspired or I need to feel more healthy. There is a deeper meaning behind all of that. So in this, convergence of things that are happening right now. So what is your perspective? Just how would you like to leave the audience with, Carol? What is ahead of us? What's happening from your point of view? And how can we align to this evolutionary pulse in the best possible way in order for us to really benefit from this initiation or transformation or the newness that we experience in this moment in time?
I believe it's a time for us to really start trusting ourselves rather than looking always outside of yourself, to come back to see what's in resonance. Energy doesn't lie, and that energy comes from the sound of your voice as well. And just notice what sits as a truth, regardless of what other people say. So it's being brave enough to beat your own drum, so to speak. And to me, the masters, the superhumans, and the gurus showed us what's possible to go from surviving to thriving. And I believe it's now our time to remember our brilliance, to remember the true human design, and to be more than we thought we could be, push those edges and, stay true to yourself, regardless of what other people say, what the masses do, and start questioning the conditioning and the programming, what you've been taught and told. Because when you start questioning the conditioning, the programming, what you've been taught and told, you'll see that a lot of it just does not make sense. And when you do that, you come back into alignment with yourself and find your own truth. And that's when you start creating a life that you really love, rather than these big highs, these big lows. And you create a brand new story. And as you know, from the work that you do, you see so many people stuck in an old story, which creates their now and the future. I don't need to be a fortune teller to tell people what will happen in a year's time or 5 years' time when you hear their story. It's very obvious. So rather than going from past, present, future, it's time to be that person of the future, bring that back to now, and then create the backstory, like a game, that supports you. So if you look at this reality like a game, how do you want to play in the game?
How do you want to play the game? Thank you so much, Dr. Carol. As I said in my introduction, this is an unordinary, extraordinary coach. This is the force of nature. Dr. Carol, thank you so much for being with us. I was definitely inspired with this conversation. Thank you for your presence, for your energy, for your beauty. We are going to reference Dr. Carol's social medias, websites, and all the other wonderful information. I encourage everybody, especially people who are willing to go to the next stage of their evolution and their development. If you're a leader, small business owner, cryptocurrency startup owner, everybody who is listening to this podcast, we have diversity of people participating. Even if you're a human resources manager and you want to do something new for yourself, you want to stretch yourself, you want to push, inspire yourself with Dr. Carol, with her programs, with her coaching, mentoring, and guidance. She is the force of nature. Dr. Carol, thank you so much for coming to this podcast today. Thank you. Everybody else, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for loving this podcast, for sharing it. Because of you, we grow. Keep on. I hope this was inspiring and wonderful as it was for me. Enjoy and bye for now.